Hello, my name is Stephen R. Wagner, and I'm the Poet Laureate of Amesbury. Here's the thing. It probably isn't appropriate, but I find myself reading less and less as time goes on. Less books, anyway, and not as much poetry as I should. Not any poetry, really. The whole thing's not quite right, I guess. But then there's this. I do find other things. I do find that I am focused and receiving and seeing, but on smaller, more subtle levels. The short words and brief signs that I pass as I move through my day, when I am writing in particular, these things which I see when I am out on my motorcycle, they are what speak to me. There is a sign in the middle of Groveland, at the intersection of Center Street and Seven Star Road, in the middle of nowhere, at the edge of woods and fields, there is a stop sign. A stop sign that has been lightly vandalized. Someone has written in large black letters, "You can't." And there is a sticker on it, a sticker of the eyes of Andre the Giant. I don't even think now that I'm correct on this. It might be a sticker of something else entirely. It is very likely that I've gotten this wrong, but I don't care. Because I've always been fond of Andre the Giant. That was what I initially saw when I first pulled up to the sign. It, the sticker, looked to me to be Andre, and so for me, that is what it shall be. It speaks to me when I pull up to it. This sign at the bottom of a steep and winding hill, at the edge of fields and forests, in the middle of nowhere. It speaks to me, and I say the words aloud in the air each time as I approach it. You can't stop. You can't stop, because it is true, I cannot. It is letting me know, it is reminding me that I am impelled to do what I am impelled to do. I do stop briefly by that sign, as I do not wish to be killed by oncoming traffic on Seven Star Road, which has no restrictions at that particular intersection. But I quickly get going again. And that is not what the sign is speaking to anyway. The sign is not about disregarding traffic regulations. No, that is not the point at all. It is about the spirit of Andre the Giant whispering to me from beyond the darkness. It is about creatures overcoming their difficulties and limitations to thrive and survive. Creatures of difficulty and strife reaching out, and becoming larger than life. You can't stop. I can't tell you how many times a day I think about that. I can't tell you how often it comes to me. And I can't tell you how much power it gives me. That is where my focus is. That is where my energy comes from. That is what I'm reading these days. Which brings us to here. I am reaching out to you across time and space. And I think that if you join in and engage, you're going to have a lot of fun. Now, on to the poems. Today, I'm going to continue to read poems from my first collection, which is entitled Timesheets, a collection of poems. The poems do not have titles beyond the individual dates for which they were written, and I will begin where we left off, at the end of the first program. You are watching Stephen R. Wagner's Collected Timesheets, Volume 2, Dissolving into Another Cat. Monday, October 19th, 2009. At the end of the circus, hidden technicians fire confetti cannons that fill the stadium with tiny white rectangles of tissue paper. appearing at first to be suspended, plain white and thinner than a timesheet. They flash like stars and twist like butterflies into the outreached hands of everyone. Monday, October 26th, 2009. As they danced in the night of the 21st century, there were reminders around them of previous times, artifacts donated by local farmers, sickles and wooden collars for cattle hung from the walls, along with other remnants of processes that had been changed or ceased altogether as things had progressed. Thin wooden timesheets, the entries on them scratched in with an awl, hung like country signposts in the corners. Monday, November 2nd, 2009. Costumed children with papier-mâché masks made of old timesheets, pressed together with a flour paste, run up and down porch steps, pausing at the top with outstretched arms to receive the joy of the evening. Monday, November 9th, 2009. We stood at the entrance to the corn maze in early November and listened to the dead stalks rattle in the wind like distant bird chatter. Eviscerated cobs of corn peeked out from yellowed husks. Stray kernels, still anchored to the core, could be seen beneath the peeling edges like scattered entries on an abandoned timesheet. Tuesday, December 1st, 2009. Old timbers and beams are renewed for the new office, while cables are drawn, floors upholstered, and walls rise to meet gleaming granite countertops made from the compression and hardening of layers of timesheets fossilized by the ages. Monday, December 7th, 2009. Water flows past the sluices beneath the building to unknown destinations, while ducks and geese idly turn and dive. A layer of ice thinner than a timesheet begins to form at the pond's center. Tuesday, December 15th, 2009. Though the paper is thicker than traditional, a discarded timesheet that has fulfilled its duty as a historical record may be put to use again in concealing smaller presents and can bring satisfaction to those who revel in detail, as there are those who appreciate crisply folded edges that stay in place and an opacity and resistance to tearing second to none. Monday, December 21st, 2009. I was surprised as the snowblower pulled itself along the driveway for the first major storm by how dry and intact the fall leaves were underneath the snow. Crisp and brittle notations as to what the weather had been, nature's own discarded timesheet. Monday, December 28th, 2009. I am often surprised by the stoutness of gift bags. Their glossy paper seems to hide materials of a more serious construction. Perhaps it is that they are inevitably garnished with the lightest of materials, crumpled timesheets and tissue papers rakishly sticking out of the top, like a paper explosion caught as it unfolds. Tuesday, January 5th, 2010. Miraculously quickly, the single digits of the century had disappeared, and it was suddenly 2010, a time that even in name was irrefutably modern, a time in which it was hard to imagine that such a thing as simple and as plain as a paper timesheet could ever have been. Monday, January 11th, 2010. The boxes and envelopes and tiny strips of paper stick together in clumps, the blue bins themselves glued together as though a massive papier-mâché snow cone with a base of discarded timesheets molded into awkward shapes, waiting for the sun to somehow recycle everything. Tuesday, January 19th, 2010. By evening, the paw prints left in the driveway from a neighborhood cat had become more of a fossilized record in the ice, firm enough so as to have false airs of permanence, as though an inked stamp on a timesheet, detailing past arrivals and departures. Monday, January 25th, 2010. The rain came down not in sheets but in reams, cutting and pitting the snow beneath it, etching out a brief historical record, marking the time in the thinning ice like a mechanical punch on a timesheet. Monday, February 1st, 2010. There are gray days, or perhaps series of gray days, long enough that it almost seems supernatural, when the sun is suddenly seen, unexpected in the afternoon, high and bright and full, completely unobstructed, towering over and through the buildings below. So surprising and strong in its manner that an unfinished room, not yet fitted with blinds, set with little more than a desk and a pile of timesheets, even the unfinished room seems surprised. Monday, February 8th, 2010. There is something primal in ticker tape celebrations, a temporary release of all anxiety. I'm going to start again. Monday, February 8th, 2010. There is something primal in a ticker tape celebration, a temporary release of all anxiety, a seemingly simple snowstorm of shredded paper that falls slowly as though to preserve some essence of the very records and timesheets that were not preserved, but rather turned loose from great heights to find their way in a new form. Monday, February 15th, 2010. It is often the case that one thing is muddled as another, a note on a timesheet perhaps indicating that the time should have in fact been billed to something else, or a holiday celebrating all the presidents that is really more a celebration of the original president choosing not to be a king. Monday, February 22nd, 2010. Spring presses up through the edges and ends of winter like a seed that has begun to germinate beneath discarded timesheets, left dirty and weather-worn on the ground. Monday, March 1st, 2010. As I sat in bed trying to coax my little girl to sleep during a rainstorm, I listened to the wind and reflected on the fact that it did not howl, but rather sounded like a jet passing constantly overhead, and it made me think directly of timesheets now, how far removed from a sheet they really are, at their essence a series of ones and zeros, decipherable only to the machines. Tuesday, March 9th, 2010. It is amazing how quickly objects bend and blend back into nature. The 80 feet of fallen fence in the backyard at first highly noticeable and out of place, quickly camouflages itself to the eye, resting comfortably amid the yellow patches of lawn that have not yet caught up with spring. The planks soften daily, giving way to the ground beneath them, a mulchy timesheet for the ants and other creatures. Tuesday, March 16th, 2010. Trying to wait out the storm that seemed to last days longer than it should, it was impossible not to incessantly check the ceilings and floors, staring at nothing, looking for gradual darkening spots to appear, like processing a blank timesheet with a lemon, looking for swirls of invisible ink to come into view. Monday, March 22nd, 2010. Pulling the trash out to the curb in the gloomy early morning light, waiting for the rain to start, I heard the geese call as they passed over me and had to catch myself. And it took a minute to realize that the birds were not disappearing, but rather returning. For a moment, the information would not register. It was like trying to change an entry on a timesheet already submitted to retrieve a letter already sent. Monday, March 29th, 2010. Working to separate a single coffee filter from the stack in an early morning fight, I was stuck. Monday, March 29th, 2010. Working to separate a single coffee filter from the stack in an early morning fight, I was struck by the similarity of coffee filters and timesheets, incredibly thin slips of paper that somehow work to filter the original inedible contents, ground coffee dust and the days blurring into nights, into something palatable and quickly understood, liquid vitality and a map of the essence of time. Monday, April 5th, 2010. When I got home from work on Friday night, my daughter was crying, nearly inconsolable. She had picked on a whim a tiny crocus that had popped up in the center of the yard, and she had quickly wanted to put it back. My wife had tried to explain that it could not, and unfortunately, perhaps she had understood and was crying, saying that she wanted it to start over again. What could we do? I eventually brought her back to the patch of wild crocuses, and we gently returned our charge, which was nothing more now than a stem, barely thicker than a hair, with a few purple petals above it. We placed it back among the others, and I propped it up slightly with some leaves that had fallen nearby, and I realized that I could not, or perhaps I would not, force her to see yet what was irreversible. We chose that day not to stare at the picked state of the flower, the unalterable aspect of the submitted timesheet available for editing or adjustment, no more. We chose instead to trust in the unusual, implausible possibility of things. Monday, April 12th, 2010. Of course, there is always more to the story. Behind the scenes details, as when an engineer can't submit their timesheet because they are eagerly awaiting the birth of a new project, or significant preceding details, as it turns out that my wife had extensively warned our daughter that to pick a flower would set in motion a one-way set of events, but she had not been able to resist. Monday, May 3rd, 2010. There is a depression in my front yard that I can't seem to keep filled. I've tried leaves and grass seeds, even full sheets of sod, but nothing seems to take. It is almost as if I'm working in a web browser, on a form or a timesheet, and I keep navigating away before I can save my changes. Monday, May 10th, 2010. In an effort to take advantage of the yard, we built raised garden beds and populated them with seedlings, lined up in rows like ones and twos across a timesheet, tiny entries on a broad canvas. Standing there, staring down at them, it was hard to fathom how much they would soon grow. Monday, May 17th, 2010. With a flurry of modernization, we've moved to automate the yard. Embedded soaker hoses on timers in the strawberry patch, along the driveway, and in the raised beds out back, tying our tiny plots of seedlings and loose dirt into the sprawling water grid, as though we were syncing the data on our electric timesheets through the cloud to the servers that lay beyond. Monday, May 25th, 2010. It is during the process of training new engineers in the timekeeping system when I warn them of the dangers of falling behind, how difficult it can be to try and recreate more than just a few days on paper. That I sometimes think of my oldest daughter and how I'll often chat to her about something funny or irreverent that happened the day before, only to discover that at 3, she often has no recollection of the idle things mentioned, and I am forced to realize that much of these first few years that we have spent together will be entirely forgotten. It will be pieced together only through the scattershot photos and home films that have been taken randomly and strung together over the years, along with the few and specific anecdotes of the most irreverent moments that we choose to keep by telling and retelling them, to keep them present. It is through this and these that we will piece together our timesheets the best we can. Tuesday, June 1st, 2010. The mammoth Russian sunflowers that we planted from seed, from nothing almost, quickly rose from their raised beds, though it must have taken them the requisite 7 to 10 days to germinate. It seemed that it couldn't really have been more than 2 or 3. Now they are well on their way to half a foot and are budgeted to rise to 12. But it is hard to envision this as we still tower over them. They sway in their early stages like single entries on an earthen timesheet. Monday, June 7th, 2010. As workloads surge like flash floods in a culvert, so too the timesheets swell from severe storms. Tuesday, June 15th, 2010. It is fun sometimes for me to see the analogies and equivalences between the timekeeping process and the real life lived. In order to ferry the girls across town on bicycles under grayish skies that may turn either way, we must first fasten down child seats to the frames and hitch a trailer that runs behind to accommodate any possible combination of children and groceries, the booking of the project, as it were, before we may enter the data on our timesheets. Monday, June 28th, 2010. I don't visit the seedlings as often as I should. But when I do, I have to smile as they waver back and forth with the undulations of the air, like guests at a party, rocking back and forth on their heels, crowded in for conversation, clustered like numbers, cascading across a timesheet. Tuesday, July 6th, 2010. We had giant shrimp for dinner that still had their small walking and swimming legs attached, and it made me realize that I had forgotten the existence of such things. The legs gone from the shrimp, just as the hands of the workers have shrunken from view, having stared so long across long flat plains of numbers running over timesheets. Tuesday, July 12th, 2010. At the beginning of the summer, when we'd let the grass grow half as high as the children and then had to catch up with the mowing, I'd noticed hordes of tiny white insects surging away as I passed, like spray from the surf or tiny white sparks that emanated from the machine itself. I had assumed them to be tiny gnats or midges or some other nuisance creature, but when my oldest daughter came into the yard to check on things as I was finishing up, we decided to stop and crouch down in the grass to look more closely, and we discovered that the tiny creatures were in fact miniature grasshoppers, fully formed but incredibly small, jumping away from us, visible in the air for only a second, arching away like decimal places, jumping off a timesheet into oblivion. Monday, July 19th, 2010. Standing back in the library area of the office, looking out to the pond, the individual window panes divide the scene outside into segments, like cells on a timesheet, the geese standing on a separate plane from the lily pads. Tuesday, July 27th, 2010. The minutes of the day ripple across the surface of our timesheet, shining as they shift, disappearing like water under the prow of the boat. Tuesday, August 2nd, 2010. When the baby had trouble getting settled on the pontoon boat, I brought her to the prow of the boat and held her in the crook of my arm. Swaddled in her life vest, she looked out to the water over the rail and grew restful. As we watched the boats passing around us and the trees along the shore, and I thought of how her mind was transforming all of the sights and sounds into the human equivalent of ones and zeros, the binary of the mind, the coding behind the timesheet, the notes and job information turned into simple raw numbers, the root level of the language of the machines. Tuesday, August 9th, 2010. It is fascinating to see how the fruit flies, once established, seem to spring from almost nothing. A simple flourish of an arm above a pile of timesheets causes 3 or 4 to take to the air, lurching upwards and away on wobbly trajectories, as though the numbers on the sheets themselves had woken from an ancient slumber to drone off across the office, following some timeless instinctual signal. Monday, August 23rd, 2010. When the grill had come to temperature, I turned and saw the heat waves rippling over a plastic deck table a few feet away, constant motion from left to right, as though the heat were moving horizontally instead of rising, like a shallow stream passing over the riverbed just beneath it, like a breath across a timesheet, blowing away tiny traces of eraser, almost too small to be seen. Monday, August 30th, 2010. As hurricanes form along the coasts, riptides pull at the beaches, sharpening the angles of the dunes, the image of the timesheet itself wavers on the screen due to problems down along the lines. And I think that is a good place for us to stop. This concludes today's program. You have been watching Stephen R. Wagner's Collected Timesheet Poems, Volume 2, Dissolving into Another Cat. Today's readings covered pages through. Thank you, and good night.